The UDRcast is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the UDRcast, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The UDRcast encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome everybody to the UDRcast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at BILLWARDLIFE and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.
Good. Okay, so in regards to what Bill's talking about, which is starting to sponsor people that are outside the rooms or trying to help these people outside the rooms. And so what you'll find a lot is a guy goes through naturally selfish and self-centered. His whole life, he's most comfortable talking about himself. And you'll notice this, that a lot of individuals only have the ability to talk about themselves. Their thoughts are dominated by themselves. They are the alpha and the omega. It goes fairly deep, but as far as what you could tell is you have a conversation with somebody, very surface. They just kind of chat about themselves, and there's really no end for you to, they're not asking you, sure as fuck not asking you questions about yourself, right? So you see this in the rooms a lot where people will talk about the step, and they'll individually talk about the step as it pertains to them only, their experience and knowledge with the step and kind of where they are with the step today. But it's so self-oriented that you have the ability to probably alienate half or more of the room, right? When these individuals speak of these things like that. And so in the first number of chapters, the A, B's, and C's as written out in the original manuscript are designed to sell the alcoholic that he is one, right? So that logically follows that if you adopt the first number of chapters, and so we're talking all the way up until how it works, right? So we're talking the doctor's opinion, there's a solution, more about alcoholism, we agnostic. If you could adopt that more and more and match your own experience to that, then you'll be able to sell the alcoholic that you are an alcoholic and you no longer live that way of life, right? So that's like the basics of sponsorship and sharing, is that the more you adhere your experience to the big book, because it's designed to sell the alcoholic that he is one, in turn, you'll be able to sell this alcoholic that you are one, right? And then he'll be able to relate to almost anything you're saying. So if you take that a step further, if you start really cutting out a lot of the substance aspects and you're just chatting about the feeling, or you're reading right from the big book, right? Like not right from the big book, but pertaining, when you start getting very good and you could go through all the chapters to the point the individual doesn't know you're going through the steps, that means that you could supersede all addictions. That means it doesn't matter if you're speaking at a podium, in a GA meeting or whatever the fuck, like if it's gambling, sex, whatever, you're able to speak about that and be a kinder sufferer because you have transcended you in the conversation. So when you do this and adopt this more and more, the more you cut out self, not only can you sponsor, let's say, the alcoholic if you're predominantly in that fellowship, first step. Second step is being able to, sell anybody that is in any fellowship. And then like the third step is society, right? You've cut it out so much so that you could speak to somebody who doesn't even have an addiction at all. just from a spirituality standpoint. So when we talk about real growth, you know, like I've always said, this true program is exhibited in being able to take individuals pick them from society and bring them to our fellowship, right? And this is kind of what we're chatting about, right? And at first, that's where it starts, because it's all individual, and they're still speaking from an individual standpoint, and me, and me. And you could get people in that individual fellowship, and you could work with them. And then once you supersede that, you could speak of any addiction. It doesn't really matter. It's more adopting the spirituality than it is actually the substances, the thoughts preceding the first drink or drug, whatever. You supersede all that. And then when you get away from the drink or drug, and it's predominantly more spiritual malady and defective character, which is for the second one too. But for the third one, it's more spirituality, defective character than it'll ever be any substance.
I want to talk about self. And, you know, I often talk about motive versus intention. In our literature, you know, we talked about a little bit ago, selfish self-centeredness is at the root of our troubles. It is self. But as people come into the program and we read through that step 3 stuff where it talks about the actor trying to run the show, you know, selfish self-centeredness being at the root of our problems, stepping on the toes of our fellows, they retaliate seemingly without provocation. But we invariably find that sometime in the past we have made decisions based on self that later place us in a position to be hurt. That is almost invariably. Whenever I make a decision based in self, I almost always put myself in that position to be hurt. And today, I see it. There's a lot of addicts and alcoholics that make decisions based in self constantly that never fucking see self. And as I've collected the data I've collected over the years, I think, dude, that most people, even in the program, aren't able to step away from self and see self in most of their actions. And what ends up happening is they keep fighting the world. They keep running into the world's fucking me, and not a lot really changes in their life in certain aspects. Life's better because they're not drinking, they're not doing drugs, but they're not really able to see the depth of self. And I think for me and for the people that I work with, it takes at least a year to 2 to 3 years to even fucking comprehend self. And that's if you're actually working like the real program based in the book. Because if you just do your first set of steps and then just go on and go to meetings, and maybe you're even sponsoring and shit, but most of these people don't understand self. And this is kind of reflected in other people's sponsorship, kind of going back to step 9. There's a lot of people that I've sponsored that have already been sponsored by people with 2, 3, 4, 5 years, where I asked them, okay, how did your amends go last year with this sponsor who's been in the program 5 years? Well, they got me to do my mom, my sister, my brother, my ex-girlfriend, all these people first that I never would have ever, which just shows me a reflection of that sponsor, that individual in the program doesn't understand the motive behind what their sponsee is fucking doing. And if the sponsor doesn't understand motive, what are we teaching the sponsee? So what I've seen is people that actually focus in on this self, and I think it has to do in large part with the step 10 personal inventory and really understanding that it's not step 10 on the wall about continuing to take personal inventory. And when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. That's not what we're talking about at all, because that will never expose self. That actually just promotes more selfishness, really, if you take the approach off the wall.
Yeah.
But through the actual step 10 process, continuing to watch for, asking God for help, talking to someone immediately, I think is probably one of the biggest things. Making our amends quickly and then turning our thoughts to someone we can be of service to. That's where this all kind of comes to fruition. And I think in large part why we've had the success rates that we have with people staying sober and living good lives is because we've been able to highlight this step 10 stuff, the theory of 6, which is exactly what we're talking about, eliminating self, but you got to understand self. And the proof is in the pudding again. It's actually producing great baleful results. And the people that you've worked with and I've worked with, we can see they're understanding self and they're transmitting that to other people. But I think in large part, the fellowships in general, they go on blind without really ever focusing in on self. And part of the reflection of that, I guess, would be 3 topic discussion meetings that never have steps on the wall anyway. What are your take on all that shit?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really promoted, in the rooms, which is where a lot of these people are centered and have been centered for, maybe even a decade, coming in and out, relapsing, coming in and out. And like, maybe they're able to, arrest the substance, but then self takes over, and on this podcast, we've chatted about it. And, obviously one-on-one, we've chatted about it a lot, that, when the substance is gone, without a solution, it's like, an overcompensation on the defects and an overcompensation on self. And it is reported a lot in the book in the book and also in other literature when it talks about these motives and intentions, right? Where, the intention is always good for the most part, because the alcoholic has to sell the alcoholic on the idea, which isn't a hard sell. But what's hard about the sell is he has to sell somebody else. So first he has to really craft it for himself, right? Where the motives could be crooked, and most of the time they are. The intention has to be sold as a fundamental good act. Where this woman's a newcomer and, I gotta, my motive is one thing and one thing only, but, I'm trying to help her, I'm trying to be a white knight, these types of things. And that's what he'll tell himself in you. Right, when we both know that, in reality, this individual he has nothing in common with, right? I mean, he's light years away as far as a program is concerned in most respects, and growth and that type of stuff. Yet God, put her right in the path. I mean, it is all pride, right? As we chatted about before, to justify the accesses. The intention is predominantly pride, right? Where the motive is altruism or selflessness or whatever. The motive is pride justifying the accesses. And so, because it's not largely promoted, it's not largely understood. Mm-hmm. Like the thing that really makes me laugh though is like, us as a society, a lot of people don't understand what the problem is, what the first problem is, right? So we talk about the substance bottom of self. A lot of people don't understand, like, how many people have told me, and I'll ask every guy I've ever worked with, what is let's say the doctor's opinion. That's obviously where I start. What is the doctor's opinion about? And without exception, they are under the impression that chapter sums up the alcoholic condition as a whole. Without exception. They always say that, every single one of them. There's never been one that has said, no, this is actually only about the allergy to the body, which is not the main issue of the alcoholic. Now, mind you, these guys are working with me because they don't know, right? But how do they know that much? What makes them think that this one chapter, although there's another 2 chapters, what makes them think that this one chapter sums up the alcoholic condition? And that's the rooms. That's the opinions and the theories that so you got to think about the main problem, and I'm going to call it the first problem. And in many cases, the program and the fellowship are only based on that one problem. So let's just say that this is the only problem, for example, right? Because as far as the rooms and fellowships concerned, this is the only problem. They don't even fucking know what the problem is. Like these third tradition meetings that we chat about, that's only based on the substance. They don't even know what the fucking problem is. They don't know about, the mental blank spot, what people call the obsession of the mind. And to be honest with you, that book doesn't talk about the obsession of the mind fucking anywhere. It explains the insanity in 1 of 3 ways, which is a plausible excuse, an insane, trivial excuse or a fucking mental blank spot. Where the fuck did mental obsession come from? Right? So even when it comes to the problem is wildly misunderstood of the substance, let alone the deeper problem, the lifelong problem, which is self and the defective character. We both know the book talks about self more than it talks about, like, the book and the literature combined, if you put all of it together. So let's say we do the big book and the 12 by 12. You have 3 chapters in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and 2 chapters in regards to the substance. So let's say substance gets 5 chapters. How many chapters does self get? The rest of all the fucking chapters. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like even to the employers, even the family afterwards. Not so much a vision for you, maybe like the last part of it, the starting substance, the last part of it could be geared towards self. But how many chapters, if we put the 12 and 12 and big book together, how many chapters are, geared towards self? Like when it talks about, even in the 9, just for an example, it says, we can't sacrifice others to spare ourselves from the alcoholic pit. What the fuck are they talking about there? That's self. That is me sacrificing the welfare of others. And like maybe the admission of this amends, although it'd make me feel good, it'd be at the expense of another individual. What is that? What is that dynamic? That's all self, right? So after we're done more about alcoholism, it's all fucking self. Like in We Agnostic, that's all that is. That's all self. These superstition and tradition and all sorts of fixed ideas. This unwarranted pride, all of it, it's all self, right? But so how is that widely missed? Right? Well, instincts on rampage, Bach, and investigation. The problem is these people are still heavily involved in self, let's just say. They're still tangled with self. They're still operating in self. Right? So now all of a sudden you call to attention something that's never even chatted about in the rooms. They've rectified the main problem. This is what the rooms shine a spotlight on, is the substance is the main problem. And what's even funny and crooked about that is, let's say, we are in the program in regards to the drink, right? That's what this whole fellowship's based around. And it's wildly understood that if you were in that fellowship for the drink, there's hard drugs that's not involved, obviously. What about marijuana that's now legal in Canada, right? So that's, we'll do a slip on that. We'll do a slip on gambling, and we'll do a slip on fucking newcomers and hookers. So even regards as, even as far as, substances are concerned in the room, there's still substances that can be fucking used, dude, let alone self. Mm-hmm. Right? So I'm highlighting all this because, if a room doesn't understand what the real problem is, and if there's multiple other substances that are acceptable, you might even get a pat on the back for some of those substances. Like maybe not newcomers, but grabbing women outside the rooms and that type of stuff. Right? So if we don't know the problem and other substances are okay, we're still really caught up in that. And that's why instincts on rampage, Bach, investigation. That's why a lot of rooms won't even accept the conversation of, you go to a room, you chat, let's say it is step 6, and you do chat about that. You lay the chips out on the table. How many people in that room are going to go along with your conversation?
Almost none.
Are they going to negate it completely?
Well, for a guy like me to walk into a room and talk on a step 6 topic or a step 10 topic, no one, they're listening because they're shocked at what I'm saying, but because I stick out like a sore thumb, they don't really believe what I'm saying because the consensus is something totally different. But I think what's more important is the consistency and the persistency of which we carry the actual truth and the message of the big book of self, because that is the fucking real issue here. And I know at my home group, my one home group, we would have numerous meetings a week. We had like a noon meeting, a 5-er, and an 8:30 meeting every single day. And then on the weekends, we had an extra meeting per day. And out of all those meetings, there's only one meeting, which was the 5-er, where we would have a step. and we would talk about. So 2/3 of our meetings had no steps and nothing about the big book. So basically all we're doing is promoting opinion and theories based in self.
Yeah.
And we wonder why fucking people aren't staying sober. And then we just tell them, keep coming back, keep coming back. And really, the people that are even saying keep coming back and going to talk to the newcomer, in my opinion, most of them really don't give a fuck about the newcomer.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a show and shine in the room while everyone's watching.
Show and shine, yeah.
But don't call me later when I'm at home watching the hockey game, because I really can't help you, but I can give you someone's number who can. You know how many times I've gotten a call from, oh, this guy gave me your number because he said he was too busy and you could probably help me. And I'm just thinking, yeah, of course they're too busy, because they're too busy because they fucking don't want to fucking do what we're supposed to do here. And they just get on with this business of being self-satisfied. But yeah, it's really frustrating. But, you know, back to my home group, I had actually proposed that every single meeting in that home group always had a step there. Know what happened?
You got casted out.
Fucking uproar, dude. Fucking all the old timers and all the people that are members of the group. No one ever showed up to business meetings. But then after I proposed every single meeting should have a step, fucking the room was full, dude, of people fucking combating this.
Like, what are they saying? Like, what are they...
I don't know, because what happened, it was that COVID last year, right when COVID kicked off. So then it all just kind of dispersed and sizzled away. And then I never really pursued it from there.
That's crazy, eh? Like, what is the justification for that? I couldn't even fathom what the justification is for not having a step. I guess maybe just because the group's been around for X and X amount of decades, that this would screw with, that type of idea. Like, we've been doing it this way and it's been successful type of ideas.
But has it been successful?
Well, like, as far as they're concerned, they're sober, right?
Yeah, they're sober.
So off the
meeting.
But
what about the 1% success rate of the fucking group in general?
Oh, 100%, dude. I hear you. Yeah, I get that. I get that 100%. But like I said, I mean, these people are still operating in the instincts, right? Mm-hmm. And they're still operating in self. And like you say, you can't see self with self, right? So that's what we're talking about. That's the trouble. You know, the trouble is, like, me and Bill have been in, many situations like this. Like, I remember I was actually talking to a sponsee not too long ago, and we're talking about chair people. Me and you have had this discussion many a time. You know, you pick somebody who's strong to open, you pick somebody strong to close, and then you have the ability to play around. You should have the ability to understand who is good at sharing, who is not good at sharing. You know, there's a lot of, like, if you are to rate people, 1 out of 10, what they are, like, how good they are to share, ideally you want to open up with a 7 to 10. Just because a guy's good at sharing does not mean that he's a good opener and a good closer. There are specific people who are good at opening meetings, and there are specific people that are good at closing meetings. And throughout the meetings you're looking at, you could get away with a couple of 4s, like 1, but you want to vary it from like maybe 5, 6, 6s, 7s throughout the meeting, and then having an opener a 7 or to a 10, and then closer, is again a 7 to a 10. And so we're kind of chatting about the dynamics of sharing then, right? And I'm talking about how, it's not very often that you're put into a situation where, you'll have to almost defend what one of the members is talking about, right? So if this member is in a God-centered room, then it's all individual shares. But if this individual is in a sick room, there's actually some good opportunities to defend what's being shared by one of the shares. And so me and you did this often in Saskatchewan. But you could also do it here in this city if you're going to, meetings that are less than desirable and there's another God-centered member in the room. As far as I'm concerned, if there's another God-centered member in the room and you know that this guy's going to be walking into a wood chipper, it's your obligation to defend what this man's saying. Odds are he sang it right from the book. And so your obligation, if he is to share before you, and likewise, your obligation is to defend this man and what he's saying. If he's speaking of the process, if he's speaking of the 12 steps, if he's speaking of his own, higher power, not so much uniqueness, but the practicality standpoint of a higher power, then your obligation is to defend him and not go your own individual way and leave him out to fucking dry. Because I've seen that multiple times, I've seen that, like we're in the wood chipper meeting, so I'm not consistent myself. I go to this, low energy meeting where these people need help and I share all my shit, let's say. But then I go to a high energy meeting and I share, the solution. I got to bring the high energy meeting to these other meetings, these other low energy, low recovery meetings. That's why I'm there in the first place, right? I'm not there to share my shit and make that meeting worse and then go to a good meeting and then share some sort of solution. I can't tell you how many guys do that. How many guys that I know that are actually, maybe a couple years, that they're like, they take advantage of the room almost, right? They'll go to these midnight meters and talk about, I'm going to fucking blow my brains out and all this other stuff. And then they go to a high energy meeting and bring that high energy. It's so fucking funny to me, dude. And they're like, Jess, how, I'm not getting sponsees. And I'm like, yeah, dude, you're not getting sponsees because you hold no consistency. You're not the same man in every room that you go to. And because of that, this person's like, fuck, this guy's blowing his brains out 1 minute. And he's like, God's gift to this fellowship the next type of thing.
Mm-hmm. So as we go to these, or whoever goes to these low energy meetings where, we're talking a lot about the problem, not a ton of solution, a lot of people kind of validating the bullshit. And then, a guy like, working a really good program walks in there and starts spitting out the solution, whether that be like God or the 12 steps or this step or that step, and how the steps have actually changed their life. Maybe we're talking about defects of character, maybe we're talking about self, maybe we're talking about whatever. When a man walks in there by himself and does this, he often walks out of there alone. Not getting talked to, not getting approached and saying, hey, great share, because now you've kind of pissed everyone off in the room because you are talking about stuff that they don't really want to talk about, back to instincts on bucket investigation. Or maybe they just have never heard the solution, really. And we can, like you mentioned, Saskatchewan, and that was our experience all through, a couple of these towns and cities where it was fucking ridiculous. And that is the ridiculousness of some of these rooms. That is their program. And that's all it is. And, it's, I guess here nor there, it is sad to me. I would like to put a posse together and just, hopefully we had enough money and we just go around Saskatchewan and wherever, maybe Manitoba and even Alberta, and just go to meeting after meeting after meeting and just spend the night in hotels and go to 2 or 3 meetings a day in these towns and just go share as like 5 of us, in a meeting. But I've also been to meetings where I go to and maybe they've asked me to share and then realized I'm never asking that guy to share.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I go back there and then I get ghosted. But that teaches me a lot about humility but it's pretty funny because now the room is not being chaired in a group God conscious manner. It's being chaired in a prideful, resentful manner because I kind of stir up a pot and they don't want me to share again.
I mean, like, that is definitely very easy to do. Like, you do a northern Alberta, and you could do all this in the weekend, right? You could figure all this out on the weekend. Like, you could easily, set up your Friday where you're making a northern Alberta. You could potentially make it all the way to Manitoba, right? So that would be Saskatchewan. So you got northern Alberta, you got Saskatchewan, you got Manitoba, you could do BC. So that would be like minus Ontario, your prairie provinces, and Quebec. But you could hit a good amount of provinces. And you could do, majority of these drives, like a Manitoba might have to be an all-day Friday. And then you could hit all meetings Saturday, potentially a morning meeting Sunday.
I'd like to stay in a place like Regina for like a week, 5 days.
And then just have a whole bunch of... See, because like they might recognize you or myself, but they're not going to recognize these other these other guys. So you could bait and switch them and you don't come in at the same time. So you confuse them a little bit, or you pull the rug out from under them.
Or we take 6 guys and split off into different meetings.
Yeah.
3 here, 3 there. And then we kind of cycle over the 5 days and just kind of drop some bombs.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it's very tricky in that respect. Like when you're doing this, you know, and in some cases you are like the only candlelight of sanity in that room, right? And so, of course, with a man who is consistent, like I don't go to these low energy meetings, you know, to feel better than these meetings or anything like that. It is of the soul. It is of the sole intention of helping. It is of the sole motive of helping, right? Because honestly, we both know I'm not getting anything out of this room. Like from a, you know, intellectual big book, I never thought of it that way. That's not going to happen from these rooms. One thing I always hear about these rooms that really makes me laugh too is that, you know, there's one specific meeting in this city that, and people will use this excuse for going to this specific meeting a lot, although I've heard it for other meetings, but this specific meeting, people say that it's real and that it's raw. Right? It's real and it's raw, and that's why I go there. And it's not real, nor is it fucking raw. Majority of it is just real and raw nonsense. Maybe that's what it is, right? So when these people say that, I'm like, okay, you like nonsense. You like your nonsense real and raw. Because when I go to these other like more high sobriety, high volume, and mind you, there are meetings that try and be like a high volume and try and be pumped for this, and it's just as fake, if not more fake, than the real and the raw. And I understand where these people are coming from. Or you could run into these bigger meetings that are more like a show and shine, like you talked about. I haven't said that, or nor have I heard that in a while. I used to love that. Right? There's meetings that you could go into that are very high volume, that the conversations and what these people are saying up at the front of the podium is more real than you'll hear in any other meeting. Right? It seems to be more real, minus the show and shine meetings, because I understand what those people are talking about. It's like a wholesale condemnation where they've gone to a show and shine meeting where even I know that it's fake. Where like people are like barely hanging on by a thread, but it's almost like act as if that whole idea of, you know, fake it till you make it or whatever the fuck is kind of, that's the whole meeting. That's the premise of the meeting, right? So you could run into these meetings that are truly God-centered. You feel the power right away. Those aren't the meetings that necessarily need my help, but I will go there and add to it. Right? It's a mixture of those meetings that fill my cup, that I am around people who are doing the deal much like I am, right? And then I'm able to bring that full cup to, you know, other meetings that are low energy. I like to call it blow your brains out, Alcoholics Anonymous type of idea, right? And then I'm able to carry some sort of a message in there. And my whole purpose of going to that definitely not to take from it. But also I could have an adverse, you know, like I could have the opposite effect of what I wanted to. Now all of a sudden I'm combating the meeting because I can't even handle the fucking nonsense. I can't handle the raw nonsense, right? The raw and real nonsense that these people are spouting out, which is kind of what we were chatting about before we hit on the...
So then you combat the meeting?
Yeah, oh yeah, dude, I'll turn right on the meeting. I'll pull out the big book and like I'm fucking, you know, almost soapbox, right? Yeah. This is like heavily early recovery. Of course, I used to do this like a spiritual pride naturally. I think that's a natural progression of the process. And then you start to level out and you start to understand what humility is, and you stop combating people and giving you their opinions, although it's from the big book. And I believe that, you know, in some respects, the motive is to do good. Like the intention is to do good, but the real motive is to actually castrate these people, right? That's really what you're trying to do. And it's like an overcompensation of, you hear nonsense all over the place and it feels as if you're sinking in quicksand. You feel like you're the only guy, you know, with a solution here. And this is why it's important to go to these meetings that fill your cup, knowing that you're not the only individual doing this by the time you go out and you hit these maybe lesser than meetings, right?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. You know, I've been to some meetings where, you know, again, like we chatted earlier, some of these people are like, well, I played the tape forward. And they're in the meeting sharing, I play the tape forward. And somebody plays off of that and say, yeah, play the tape forward. And, you know, just kind of giving you so much exact opposite of what the book is saying. You know, I got to remember, you know, I got a family at home, and that's what keeps me sober. And I come here and you guys keep me sober. This is human power, right? You know, my sponsor keeps me sober, or I don't have a sponsor even. And like, there's just so much shit that I hear, and I'm kind of sitting there going, what the fuck are we actually talking about? So as I hear all of these things, and I'm going to use an example that happened last night. I was talking to this individual on the phone, and they keep saying I played the tape forward, and, you know, I've been sponsored by like 20 different people, and, you know, I don't think that ultimatums work as a sponsor to a sponsee. And this person's just giving me everything and all their opinion. Meanwhile, they relapsed like yesterday, and they relapsed like a week ago, and they relapsed like a week before that. And like, I've known this individual for like 5 years, and they've relapsed like for 5 years. And they're telling me what works and what doesn't. And I said, what the fuck do you know? What the fuck do you actually know? And then I could feel my voice rise, and I could feel like my heart rate rise. And I'm like, you don't know fucking anything about anything other than how to get fucking high. I said, I'll tell you what, fucking ultimatums do work. And I said, I do sponsor with ultimatums. And I tell them, this is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to go. And if you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to fucking work with me. But like you talked about earlier, these people are willing. And it's not like I'm like whipping them and saying, this is how it's going to be. Like, they're agreeing because they know that if they fucking run their life and they run the show, they're as good as fucking drunk. So it's a relationship that fucking works with some of the ultimatums. And a lot of these ultimatums are actually in the 9. They're in the disciplines. They're in the timeline it takes to do the work. They're in the number of meetings that the individual has to go to. The phone calls to me as a sponsor based on whatever they're struggling with in their life. Like, these ultimatums, I think, are fucking hugely important. And I'm listening to a chronic relapser telling me how it's fucking stupid and it's not important. But it just, you know, fucking some of the nonsense that I hear. And you've heard of Chris R., the speaker? Mm-hmm. Have you listened to him much?
A little bit here and there. I'm not Captain Speakers. Like, my first early recovery, I listened to a lot of them. And then I completely negated all speakers.
Give
the last
Chris R. a
3 years.
listen, dude.
Yeah, is it good?
He is so abrasive and direct, and probably doesn't win a lot of friends. But he's the kind of guy that's going to go into a roundup where there's a few hundred people, and he's going to rip them a new asshole. And he does it in a not friendly way. But he talks the truth about the book. He talks the truth about sponsorship. Talks the truth about God. And when I first heard him years ago, I was like, holy shit, bud. But then I kept listening to him, and he actually helped change my perspective on what I say in the meeting. I was listening to him a lot when I was going to Regina years ago. And he would say, don't ever waver on the talk of God, because God is what's gotten you sober and kept you sober. Don't waver on talking about the steps in the big book. Don't waver on certain things, and don't adapt to be the chameleon and just fit in with the room. Fit in with the big book. And so he was really impactful in my early sobriety, but I still throw him in every now and then for shits and giggles, because he's amped up, bro. He's full of energy, and he's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, there's a couple of speakers that we listened to early recovery when we were driving up to Saskatchewan that you still even listen to today. And yeah, I mean, the thing that I like about these speakers is, you know, you could end up getting interested in the personality of the speaker and some of the uniqueness that maybe they went through. But reality is, you know, these people, I relate to them because I am them. Right, which kind of takes away the uniqueness. Like I'm working with this one guy on the weekend here, and I say this to all my guys, and I've done this probably only the last year or two, because I've really caught on to this, that what happens is that the 12 steps work, God works through them, their life has changed like a full 180, and that gratitude gets bestowed on me, eh? And then what happens is these guys, I've had guys buy me, items of clothing. I've had guys buy me, give gift cards, all this other shit. And I don't accept it because that's what they want, eh? They want me to accept it, eh? They want that gratitude to be bestowed on me. And then they pay me off with like a $100 gift card to the keg or whatever the fuck. And then now their obligation's over, eh? So if I accept it, the transaction is that it's over now. No, I've done this for you, and now you've done this for me, and we're okay now. But it's like, no, motherfucker. It's like that gratitude that's bestowed on me actually gets pointed to the program of whichever. And now that's you work off your gratitude doing what I did for you, eh? Do you understand what's happening here? The alcoholic is such a crafty little cocksucker that, of course, had you not known, you would be like, oh, yes, I've done something nice for you. You've done something nice for me. But upon further inspection, that's what's happening, is it is a payoff. I think it was Clancy who chatted about this.
No way.
Yeah, well, he's not so much in this area that I'm talking about. What he's specifically talking about is that, if you do pay me, then, I'm under I have to essentially prostitute my ideas to what you want me to do. And this is more like a political type of idea. And this is why a lot of this shit hasn't bled into the program, obviously, because, if we're taking, money from, let's say, Johnson & Johnson or something, then now, of course, we're under the dictates of, a corporation or whichever, right? But on a smaller level, that's what's happening here. Is that instead of actually doing the full fruition of the work, right, and that gratitude going into this program and going into the individuals and then them doing likewise, they're trying to, essentially fucking on a low level buy me off type shit so that the transaction ends here, right, instead of, continuing the rest of their life.
Taking that exact premise down the road, so I'm assuming that this type of transaction that the sponsee would want to give you the accolades and possibly a gift for, we're talking this would typically happen in the first 8 months or a year.
Yeah, typically. I mean, this will be definitely what's the person's 12 step. Once they've gotten the benefits, they have continued something of the work. Maybe they're looking in the sponsorship and yada yada, and then through their, because they do feel gratitude.
So how about 3 years, 4 years down the road, those guys that have continued to rely on the big book and the program and their own God, but they've also continued to use you as a sponsor and really respect and have gratitude for you. How do you handle like those gifts down the road where they want to take you and your old lady for dinner, or they want to invite you over for Christmas and give you a gift, or how do you roll with that stuff?
Yeah, like that's a little bit different, eh? That's much different because a relationship's been built by that time. So me going over to their house for dinner and even likewise is much different because they're doing the deal in all aspects, right? We're talking about a guy who's on the cusp of doing the deal. Yeah. And in order to negate the deal now, he is trying to buy me off, right? If it's 4 or 5 years and, we go out to Kelowna or, they buy me a gift for Christmas, completely different, right? Because he's doing the deal. He's not, the motive behind the gift is an extension of the relationship that's been built, right? It's not to negate the process, right? Which you'll find a lot. At least I found that a lot, so much so that I've had to nip it in the ass before it even happens. Right? Like how many job offers I've gotten from guys. It's so fucking funny. Because also too what it is as well is it is a dynamic of the relationship. Like I've worked with guys throughout the 12 steps that have offered me positions throughout the process to break the sponsor and sponsee dynamic, to actually equal out the dynamic. Where, yes, I have this knowledge in the 12 steps and experience, and I've sponsored many men like you, and you have no fucking idea what you're talking about, and you are asking me to take you through the process. So it is a sponsor-sponsee. It is a mentor-mentee, right? And throughout the process, they'll try and, like, I've had one guy, dude, I can't tell you how many job offers he's offered me, man. Like, I've taken him through the steps twice now. I took him through the steps 5 years ago, a long time ago. Like, I was in early recovery myself and just started sponsoring by the time I took him through the process. And he offered me positions then, and I didn't understand what I know now, and I didn't take them much like I wouldn't take them now. But this guy goes out of his way today to offer me positions, and I don't take them because he's trying to equal it out, eh? Where he's like, yes, you know more than me, but I am, let's say I am better equipped in this area, so I am gonna try and help you. I'll be completely honest with you. I bet you if I did call him out on the position, there is no position. You know what I'm saying? It's all smoke and mirrors, most likely. But that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to equal this relationship. Ugh. A lot of guys can't handle it.
Thank you for tuning in to the UDRcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at BILLWARDLIFE to see everything that we have going on. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.